Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the pleasure of Graham Charlton, the CFO of Softcat, in the studio. How are we doing, Graham?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me along. Weather looks like it's beginning to turn, so for early February, hopefully sign of better things to come, so I'm all right, thanks.
Good. Now, Graham, when I get someone in the studio, I normally take a peek at their LinkedIn profile and start looking at their background. And I noticed with you that you'd started off having a biochemistry degree from Cambridge. So how does a guy that has a biochemistry degree from Cambridge end up running or being the CFO of Softcats? Let's start the story.
God, it's a good question. So at school, I mainly played football. That was kind of what school was for me until my knee broke when I was 15. And suddenly, actually, because I played so much football and kind of thought that's maybe what I might do as a career as well. And then it kind of came literally overnight crashing to a halt. But I was really competitive and I needed like a different outlet then for that competitive spirit. So I sort of got suddenly quite interested in the academic side of things. And I was just sort of had a natural affinity for science and maths. So did my A-levels, went to university, ended up doing a biochemistry degree. But the thing that I really liked and probably wanted to, the first job I can really remember wanting to do was to be a writer because I like reading as well. So I've sort of got this weird, I'm a bit odd in many ways, I think, but I've sort of got this weird combination of kind of, I like numbers and facts and I really like knowing how things work. But I love stories and like human stories and understanding kind of how facts and figures and people so I guess my career, sort of that grounding in science, has turned over time into sort of how to apply that in a complex human world and bringing the two things together. So I don't know, maybe there's something in that, but yeah, but the science was and how things work was kind of where I came from.
So it could have been completely different because you could have pursued a football career because you mentioned before that your dad was he a pushy dad? Would he try and get into football?
Yeah, no, that was definitely part of it. We were talking over lunch about this. I played football a lot. My dad played football when he was a kid, didn't quite make it. And I was playing at a high level as a kid in the England schoolboy squad, playing for West Ham, Chelsea. I signed schoolboy forms at Chelsea. And but over time I went from loving the game to hating it. And it became so serious, too much of it, and my dad was definitely pushing hard, and I'm not kind of a character that responds well to being pushed and told what to do. So he was trying to help, but it was massively counterproductive. So yeah, football was a massive part of my life, and then kind of almost nothing overnight, and that was a bit disorientating when it happened like that.
And when you had the switch, then did you suddenly become very academic? What was that? Was that how you pursued your
it was
your
weird
degree?
Because my dad was suddenly gutted that there was no football, and my mum's cheering in the silence because she kind of always wanted me to kind of work hard at school. So I sort of went from being kind of good and capable academically, but not really putting the effort in, to kind of turned on the afterburners because I didn't have another outlet for that competitive spirit, and also because it was clear I wasn't going to be a footballer because of a knee that didn't work anymore. So and it happened probably at the right time. It happened kind of at the beginning of that last year of GCSEs. And so yeah, I suddenly sort of started to work hard, and my mum was delighted.
So you finished your degree in biochemistry. What were your thought process then? Where was your career going to go?
So I went to university thinking, I mentioned I really enjoyed science at school because it was teaching you how the world worked, and I love to know how things work. So suddenly all this like common everyday stuff around you work out how, that's why it does that, or that's how that technology works. So I thought, I can do this and I enjoy it, so I'll go and do it at university, and then I'll probably do research and do a PhD or whatever. So I sort of thought going to university that's the path I would take. And then I realised, probably as early as literally 2 weeks in, that science at that level slows down to such an extent that I was never going to spend 3 years in a lab working out exactly how that protein folded to realise then there was no application for it. And so it very quickly realised, right, that this isn't the route. So I'm going to get my degree and then do something different. So I probably spent, the 3 years doing my degree trying to decide between, there was two options. Become a teacher. I had a brilliant science teacher at school, really inspirational, or something else my dad worked in finance, and everybody was telling me it's a great way to get into business. So it was one or the other. So what I ended up doing was finish degree, did a year's teacher training, loved the job. As a career, it would have driven me mad. So I became an accountant and got into business that way. And it was, in hindsight, a brilliant choice because it's worked. It's played to my strengths and enabled me to have a career that, I've really enjoyed it.
It's funny, my first job was for a firm of chartered accountants in Windsor. I won't mention the company, but I actually worked there for about a year, and I found it very, very difficult to concentrate because it was almost like they had the time when they actually had to allocate 15 minutes to
a job.
So what would happen is that a job would come in for like 2 or 3 hours, and you'd suddenly think, God, I've got to do this actual work. Yeah. And then you actually allocate the job. How did you find the discipline in terms of actually doing the accountancy? Because you have got to be very, very disciplined to be an accountant.
Well, and so that's I remember having to do exactly that. When I was doing my training contract and working in practice, and we had to allocate time in that way, and I hated it because it was so constraining. And I knew that I was going to qualify and then get a job out of practice in industry as quickly as I could. Because the reason I went into finance wasn't because, I could do the numbers and the academic discipline of it. But what I really enjoyed was how it was applied. And that was the difference with teaching. A lot of the way we were taught to teach actually didn't have an application in the classroom. And that's why I kind of said as a career, it probably would have driven me mad. But when you started to learn the finance stuff and you realised, and this is why you need it to run businesses. And you can look at a set of numbers and very quickly see, I can see what this business does and how it operates. And when you're in a business doing that and you can see the granularity of what the numbers is telling you, the value isn't that you've added it up and you know the answer. The value is, so how do we make it go faster as a result of understanding it? So I moved straight into industry to get into to get away from that disciplined accounting practice, doing jobs, charging time, into what do you do when you've got the numbers, and how do we make the business better as a result? So I left as soon as I was qualified, moved to Experian, and started to do exactly that kind of job in industry, and that's what I enjoyed.
And how was your time at Experian? What did you like about that?
Yeah, so I was 6 years at Experian, great company, massive multinational. The time I was there, we were demerging from a bigger GUS group, coming off the stock exchange and going back on just as Experian. So it was interesting times because diverse business, software element, analytics, big databases, marketing, loads of different facets to it, expanding rapidly, acquisitively, organically. And I was there 6 years. I kind of went in as a financial accountant, moved very quickly into a planning and analysis role, then moved into a divisional finance director role. And that was where I was trying to get to, because suddenly you're in a team running a business and you're the finance guy in that team. But to me, and there's a spectrum of finance people, from kind of your control and reporting through to business growth. And I was always kind of extremely aligned to that end of it. So that's when I really started. But then that's when the pressure comes as well, because you're accountable for decisions. And so I had a great time at Experian, 6 years, but did 3 or 4 different jobs there, depending on how you look at it. And it was brilliant grounding but I knew I had to leave. I knew I wasn't going to spend my career in just one place. And the decision to leave Experian was a really tough one. But after 6 years, it just felt right. I needed to go and do it elsewhere as well.
So you joined Softcat as their CFO 8 years ago. What first attracted you to the business? Because they're very different, Experian to the Softcat and in IT.
Well, and I was 5 years at Compare the Market, almost literally herding meerkats. Because the money we were spending on marketing and controlling the marketing data and stopping him spraying money up the wall, that was an interesting. But the thing about Compare the Market was the culture there was very controlling and very hierarchical. So it was a great business, had a great time there. But when I started to talk to Softcat, there was 3 or 4 things. One was the culture, and it was so obvious that this was something unique and special in that regard. And Compare the Market was a great business, but the culture didn't suit me. I'm not formal, hierarchical. Had to sit in an office, and I hate sitting in an office. You're not plugged into what's going on. Softcat, we don't have any offices, and we never ever will. So the culture was the first thing, and I met Martin, who was chief exec, Martin Hellawell at the time, and by a million miles, he and Graham Watt, 2 of the best people I've ever worked with. So a chance to work with Martin in a culture like that. We were going to take the business public, so we were doing the IPO, hadn't done that before. So that was a massive professional challenge. And then you looked at the quality of the business, and you looked at the numbers, and you looked at this is entirely organic. And you look at Softcat performance against the industry, nobody else was doing this. So, I mean, it was the easiest decision of my career by a mile, and in hindsight, the best decision to move. And those were the factors: the culture, the people, the quality of the business, the chance to take it public. And the real big challenge was taking it public without it destroying that culture. And a lot of people were really worried that when we listed it, it would destroy the culture. And I could see, in conversation with Martin when I was on the way into the business, I could see, I know that we can do this and not allow that to happen. And I was very driven to kind of get it done and preserve what Softcat was, even though we were on the